I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Any day. We're talking some Kentucky guys later today, so that's always fun.
Yeah, exciting, dude. Honestly, I had not paid a lot of attention to Kentucky just because they hadn't
Not
been
much
playing
reason
very
to.
good football. Let's start there. Let's just
Yeah.
jump right to it. Let's start there with Kentucky because you're originally from Kentucky, a Kentucky fan growing up. Now you're in Tallahassee, but you keep a very close eye on that program. Cutter Boley, 6'5", 220 from Lexington. I see 247 was a little lower on him than the industry. He was a composite 4-star, 247 3-star. Interesting background, basketball player. You've seen that before, especially with these bigger quarterbacks, but also some jumps in track, which I thought was pretty interesting, just showing his athleticism. And then seeing him on the field, again, you have more of a background with him than me, but first thing that jumps out is big and athletic.
Yeah, this is a guy that I've really followed since he was maybe in 8th grade. He's one of the more talented quarterbacks to ever come out of my home state. He's originally from Kentucky. It says Lexington on his profile. He is from somewhere in Eastern Kentucky. I forget the actual name of the school, but he started his high school career out there. Moved to Lexington Christian Academy for his junior and senior year. He was in the 25 class and he reclassed up to the 2024 class, but he had actually originally reclassed backwards. So he's supposed to be in the 24 class. And I think once he realized that he was good enough to not have to be old for his grade, he decided I'm gonna skip that 5th year of high school and go back to my original class. It was a big time recruitment. There were a lot of schools after him: Tennessee, Florida State. I think Alabama was in the mix. He took a lot of visits very early in his career, and there was a point. I mean, he was a 5-star on some of these sites earlier in his career in high school. And yeah, some of the basketball stuff. He's a pretty gifted basketball player as well. He's just athletic, tall. This is just a very. I mean, he's pretty technical too.
Yeah, they
This is
hit him
a
with the
very
Dirk.
talented player. Very talented.
You hit him with a Dirk fadeaway. Why do you think his
Yeah.
stock dropped to where he's a 3-star on the composite? You didn't get smaller, obviously.
Yeah, he didn't get smaller. I think probably part of it was as he reclassified back up, you lose some of the luster of like, oh, he's doing this as a sophomore or junior or whatever it might have been, but he moves up a grade. And I played him all 2 years that he was in high school, and I did not get a sack on him personally, but we did get some sacks on him, and I think he had a worse year as a senior than he did as a junior. Not quite as gifted of a receiving core. They had a running back who plays for Virginia now, who left for his senior year. So I think it was just a little bit worse with supporting class. I think he played through an injury maybe, but he did definitely drop about 200 spots in the rankings. He was top 150 at one point, ended up in the 300s. But he still put up solid numbers: 64% completion, 2,100 yards, 24 touchdowns, 9 interceptions as a senior. And it was just a little bit up and down, if I remember correctly, his senior year. They lost a few games they probably shouldn't have lost, in which he didn't really play as well as he should have. I think this game at Western, he might have had like 7 touchdowns on Western Kentucky's campus. But this is a guy who obviously was not the starter coming into the year. UK brings in Zach Calzada, who very clearly things went south very quickly. He comes in, he gets hurt. Boley takes over as the starter, has a few up and down. It's really just been up and down basically his entire career, to be honest. He starts his career, I guess, rewind last year as a true freshman, starts his career, comes in at the end of a blowout loss at Florida for Brock Vandagriff. First pass of his career is a pick six to Cormani McLean in the fourth quarter. I think he went 1 for 6 in that game, had like a 25 PFF grade. It was really ugly. Next week, they play FCS team. He puts up like a 90 PFF grade. Then they go on the road to Texas, and he comes in the second half, and I think it was the best quarterback performance I've seen in a Kentucky uniform since Will Levis. Oof. Then he comes back to Lexington, plays Louisville, throws like 3 picks, 2 pick sixes, gets benched again for Brock Vandagriff. It was just it's a roller coaster with Cutter Boley. He comes in this year. He has some good games. He has some terrible games. I really never know what we're going to get, but this weekend was a good one.
Yeah, Calzada, we always were, as Cubans, were waiting for the Cuban quarterback to emerge. Everybody thought it'd be Calzada, ended up being Fernando Mendoza. But yeah, so just this past week, 5 touchdowns?
Yeah, freshman record at UK.
So what do you see this week against one of the best fronts you're going to face, period, that impressed you as far as his development?
Yeah, so it wasn't really the high end passes that you're used to seeing that excite you with Boley. It was more of just UK's O line stinks again, and he struggled to navigate the pocket up to this point. I think he's had a few flashes of really impressive uh, play under pressure, but in this game, he did a really impressive job, I think, of just finding his running backs, finding his tight ends, finding these check downs. And you have it listed here, hit 12 different receivers in that Tennessee game. And I think that was really, he was just doing a really good job of sensing the pressure that Tennessee was sending and getting the ball out quickly. And that's not really something we've seen a lot from him up to this point. So this is clearly a guy who's still maturing. He's only 20 years old, getting reps under his belt, but you see the growth. I think he's finally stacked two solid games in a row here these last two games for UK. So they have something in Cutter Boley if they can keep him around. I know for a fact that he strongly considered leaving in the portal in the spring after they brought in Calzada. I think there was word that he might have actually been outperforming Calzada, and they really had no urgency to shake things up as far as who was going to start to open the year. So that was probably a little frustrating. He'll be one to monitor this offseason, unfortunately. Obviously, I think he'll give UK the first chance, and if they bring in a guy like Stein from Oregon, who's a QB specialist, former quarterback, and maybe even if they do keep Stoops and just shake things up on the offense because the OC is really rough right now. I don't think it's a lock that he leaves, but man, I don't know why I'd come back if I were him, you know.
He's impressive. You see the development needed. I'm not sure his arm. You tell me. I remember Burrow was a guy who every year you see him get better at throwing. I mean, just his throwing improved tremendously since he was a high school player. I don't know if was Boley a really serious basketball player where he was playing half the year, or was it more just kind of like he did a little bit?
Yeah, just for his school, I think.
Yeah, because I know with someone like a Burrow, that came later. And this is the guy who reclassed. There's a lot of reasons why maybe he's earlier in his development, but yeah, it seems like he has more arm than you see on some of his throws. I don't know what you think about that. Just body wise, athletically, he has arm, but there's still some polishing up to do in that part of his game.
Yeah, his mechanics stunk in high school. They were really bad. They've improved a lot, and I think you've always been able to tell that he had more arm strength in him, and it just hadn't really been unlocked. And he's definitely shown it off a few times throughout this season. I would say it seems to be improving with his feel for the game.
No, he's starting to get now attention from other quarterbacks. Just talked about Andre Woodson, another big athletic quarterback, kind of helping him with the process. I remember at one point I thought Andre Woodson was going to be a high NFL pick, just because he was so big and productive for that spurt where he was really rolling. Ended up being a good player just over the course of his career. But he has some help. The Boley does from a receiver another young guy, another big guy, DJ Miller.
Yeah, this is a guy who honestly I'd kind of forgotten about. He kind of got lost in the fold. He was a top 500 high 3-star recruit in last year's class, 6'3", 204-pound true X wide receiver, true freshman this year. He'd been recovering from a quad injury and made his season debut in last week's game. But this is a guy who was extremely productive in high school coming out of St. Louis, 137 catches, 2,400 yards, 33 touchdowns in his last 2 years of high school. And he showed out against Tennessee. 5 catches on 5 targets, 120 yards, 2 touchdowns, one of which he was able to run past the entire defense. And another Boley kind of rolls out of the pocket, hits him right in the corner of the end zone. He gets a little toe tap action. It was a really encouraging performance from DJ Miller. And that's another guy in this young receiving room. We've talked about Hardly Gilmore in the past, but it's something you can build off of if you can maintain or if you can keep all these guys around.
And look, you're tight to the program here as we watch DJ Miller and some of the stuff he can do. St. Louis has been a very good area for wide receivers, by the way, lately. Some really, really explosive players coming out of that region into college football. But in terms of Stoops, I mean, you're a Kentucky fan. How do you see this playing out? Because clearly these are guys, especially you could take the whole passing game, right? You take a Gilmore, you take Cutter, you take Miller. I mean, that'd be nice to just take everybody together. But like, what is the expectation in Kentucky right now with where this program goes?
So I think it's actually kind of shifted within the last 2 weeks. it's sort of shifted from, for those who are unfamiliar, UK is in the worst buyout situation, in my opinion, in the country. Stoops is the 12th largest buyout, obviously not the 12th best coach in the country, and he's the only coach in the SEC that has his entire buyout due within 30 days of being fired. You can't spread it out like most of these other schools can. It's $38 million. UK is obviously not well known for allocating a lot of funds towards their football program. So if they spend $38 million on firing him, you're going to have to go cheap on your next coach. You're going to have to go cheap on your NIL in the future. But after these past 2 weeks, after you blow a game to Texas that you probably should have won, you definitely should have won. They set records in finding new ways to lose that game. They outgained them in every stat and still lost. And then after you get completely embarrassed in your own stadium by rival Tennessee, I think there's kind of some things shifting within the boosters and the donors, and I think we might see change sooner than originally expected, for sure.
So you think potentially this year?
Like I think it'll probably be after the season if it happens. But yeah,
last season.
Yeah, the time has come. I'm just ready to rip the Band-Aid off because it's sort of similar to the Calipari end of his tenure. It's a guy who's done so much for the program, truly a legend, but things got sour towards the end. And every year that he sticks around, his legacy just gets a little bit more tarnished. And I hate that that's how he's being remembered. And in my mind as well, that guy gave me amazing memories growing up, but it happens with every coach. They get to a point in their tenure. Coach O, Jimbo, these guys who have massive success at their program, it doesn't last forever. And I think we've probably reached that time. I think we've reached that time a few years ago, honestly.
And Miller is impressive. Just watching him, his high school highlights, knowing how he produced. This is a talented young passing game. We talked about Gilmore in the past on this show a few times and what he can do. Obviously, with Cutter, he's starting to emerge. And you add this guy in the mix when you look at the production that he had last week. You mentioned 5 catches, 120 yards, 2 touchdowns, third most by UK freshman ever. And then the high school production. We always talk about on this show, high school production with wide receivers is so key to me. I mean, when you look at these guys, the guys that get open and are quarterback friendly, they tend to find the football. It's hard to find too many of these size speed freaks that just, for whatever reason, their team couldn't get in the ball and they don't produce and they blow up at the next level. It happens, but man, it's just much more common to see guys like this that have ability, but then also have the production to match.
Yeah, I mean, 100. You don't accidentally get 137 yards catches over 2 seasons at this size. This isn't just your slot possession guy underneath. This is a big body, true X, and he's racking up catches in his high school career. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of intriguing pieces in the passing game for Kentucky. Redshirt freshman tight end Willie Rodriguez is also from the state. He was a 3-star, but he's really, really athletic, has some really impressive catches from Cutter. They're roommates, if I remember correctly. And one other thing about Cutter that I know a lot of UK fans appreciate. UK fans. All right, man. All right. Watch it. UK fans have been begging, and I think most programs have, for them to throw the ball to the tight ends basically since I was born. And Cutter, growing up a UK fan, I think he's thrown the ball to the tight ends more already this year than they had in the entire Stoops tenure in the season. So that's been fun to watch. Yeah, I mean, I do agree. I think ultimately the grass might not be greener if you move on from Stoops. Kentucky's got a pretty low floor as a program, but he showed that you can raise the ceiling. I don't know if that's going to be the case in the NIL era now because they just don't have they aren't allocating the resources that the other schools in the conference are. But you just got to switch something up at this point.
Yeah, got 1,200 on. By the way, remember to like and subscribe to Group Chat Sports. That's our national show that we do. We record a few times a week right after Canes Insight, talking national and really the stuff that you're not seeing on ESPN, trying to get you the emerging guys, the breakout players, the stars of the week that you may not be hearing about, but that you're going to be hearing about in the future, like some of the guys in the Kentucky passing game who maybe end up in the portal, maybe whoever the next Kentucky coach or next Kentucky coordinator or just this staff right here hone into being stars of college football. And that's what we're trying to do, just give you the next one every single time. But let's shift to a Cane, right? Because we do have a lot of Canes fans on right now as we record. And one of the stars I thought of the blowout win against Stanford, which again, overmatched opponent, but it's hard to miss Markel Bell, highest grade offensive tackle this week, Pro Football Focus. You see the size, a couple highlights where he was just straight tossing guys, kind of ragdolling people in the running game. Fink, you're not a Miami fan, so you're watching this just from an offensive line perspective here. What do you see when you see Markel Bell at this stage of his development, second year out of JUCO?
I think you see a guy that you really, really, really want to make it work, because if he makes it work, he's about as big of a human being as you ever see. He reminds me a lot of DeJuan Jones at Ohio State. I remember he was the right tackle across from Paris Johnson. You have Francis on the other side here. And I remember at the time, Francis is almost certainly going to be drafted ahead of Markel Bell. But Paris Johnson, who was also drafted ahead of DeJuan, he did not have the cleanest pressure like pass pro numbers. And that's sort of the case with Francis. Obviously, he has more than adequate pass pro numbers. But DeJuan Jones, much like Markel Bell, they just don't allow pressure at the college level, because it's just impossible to get through these guys or really around these guys unless you're like David Bailey or maybe Ruben Bain in practice.
Right.
This 6'8", 348-pounder, 98th percentile arm length, 7'2" wingspan, 95th percentile. That's for the NFL standards. He's just a ginormous human being, and he's allowed 6 pressures in 7 starts this year with 0 sacks. He's adding stuff in the run game. I feel like he gets more confident in the run game every time I watch him. Last year, he looked a little uncomfortable, just throwing his weight around in the run game, and I don't think that's the case whatsoever this year. You said it. He had a few big time blocks in that Stanford game. Put up the highest grade of any offensive tackle in the country this week, career high grade. Do you know what his eligibility situation is?
I think you'd have to sue.
Okay.
Play, but theoretically, if you follow the Pavia deal, you're talking about he'd be eligible, but he'd have to sue.
Yeah, so if he could get another year, we might see a first rounder, at least top 50 guy. But right now, I think I'd probably have an early day 3 grade on him. I think he's more of a athlete than a guy like DeJuan Jones. I keep calling back to that, but there's not too many guys built like that.
No, it's a great comp.
I think he's a better athlete. DeJuan kind of gets his feet stuck in the sand sometimes. I don't see that quite as often with Bell.
Yeah, and so I love the DeJuan Jones comp. Yeah, 4th round pick. I could see that. I've talked to people and they're saying late day 3 right now, and I think he will go up to that early day 3 because truth is, number one, he's been very productive just from a Canes fan perspective. There's not been much pressure coming from the left side. He's been effective in the running game. Not a lot of penalties. He's been pretty solid just from a college productivity standpoint. You look at a game against Florida where Tyreek Sapp really was invisible in that game, and then the next week he's playing Texas and dominating, right? Markel Bell really took him out of the game, which is, on the higher end of competition, right? You're going to face. We'll see if Miami makes the playoffs. You'll see better pass rushers battling. But he's a high character guy, which I think is something that, when scouts know him. But I just think you've seen this enough to know that as more people get to know one of these high character guys that presents well and does the right things and has good reputation in the building, that tends to move them up through the process. Also, I think the guy just keeps getting better and better. So we'll see how the film looks by the end of the year. But the weaknesses with him are going to be just related to his frame. He's not going to be the most laterally quick. He makes up for some of that with his length. Obviously, the pass rushers he's going against are going to get better. I think the anchor stuff, especially last year, it's gotten better, but he's not the most bottom heavy guy. He's tall to begin with. You can get under him a little bit. And then the bending, he does have some waist bend to him, 6'9". So I think the DeJuan Jones comparison is a really, really good one, just in terms of there's not that many guys with that size. There's going to be some clear negatives, but someone's going to take him with the way tackles are valued here.
Yeah, I think he's been extremely. You could probably make the argument he's been. I don't know if I would make the argument he's been the best O-lineman for the Canes, but I think you certainly could make that argument, especially with these pass protection numbers this year. And we talked about it on another show. We don't 100% agree with the pressure charting and stuff for PFF, but it's probably pretty accurate. And I think with the character stuff, we're talking about DeJuan Jones. One of the big knocks on DeJuan Jones was does this guy want to be an NBA player? Like, does he?
Right.
I think does he love football? Is what they used to say. So that won't be the case with Markel Bell. I don't
At
think you
all.
improve like this if you don't care about football. And obviously, you say there's great stuff being said about him around the building.
No,
When
and
was doing
I
some
interviewed him
research-
personally. Like
Yeah.
I can vouch. I mean, this guy is just not. I can vouch for what people say about him and for just my impressions of him. This guy is going to be on the high end of not. He's not just going to be like check. It's going to be we believe in this guy, but from the way he works. So
Does he have his own burger? Did I see that?
He does, and he actually did an
That's
interview with Peter Reeves, who's usually with us on Group Chat Sports, but is at some Canes basketball stuff. But yeah, his own burger. Shout out to our guy Patrick at Pop Subs, who made the burger for Markel. So he's got his own burger for charity, which he really kind of took charge on. The guy's clean. He's not just clean as a whistle, which he is clean as a whistle, but on top of that, it really is a care factor and you hear coaches say that this guy cares about doing the right things from a detail standpoint, from a body standpoint. So like anything that's going to make him better, he is for, which is why I definitely try to just push him further. I think it's like with Jalen Rivers, right? Jalen Rivers was somebody who ended up going 5th round, but I was always telling buddies of mine in the league, like, hey, this guy's a really, really safe bet personality wise. Whatever you have him as, you can kind of add 10% to it. Because of the reliability, and he's already starting in the NFL. I think Markel could do something similar.
Would you put Inez in that category? I feel like I've seen pretty good stuff about Inez as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're really
all those guys, I'm sure. Yeah,
high character. I would say Inez, an academic All-America, so he's smart. But I think the thing with Inez that makes him unique and different from some of these other guys is he's the instigator.
Yeah,
he's the guy always talking trash, and he brings that element to the offensive line, which is huge. Bell, more of a quiet personality, but I wouldn't say he's a gentle giant. I mean, he's not someone you have to convince to be physical. I mean, did you see that rep where he just tossed that guy?
Yeah. I think that was what made me watch the Miami film from this week. I think my favorite part about Bell is anytime I can see a picture of him standing next to Alex Mirabal. that is just awesome.
Well, help me out with Bell because you really are much better with the PFF grades than I am. I look at them, but I'm not as in tune with them. They're more just like kind of like if I see a lot of green lights or watch, or if there's a lot of red lights watch, it's more of that kind of thing for me. But from the grading standpoint, and I know there's been a progression in his grades too since he first got on the field. Like, what do you see from Bell from a college productivity standpoint? And of course, you watch the film and you're an offensive line guru. Like, what do you see from Bell in terms of how he ranks just as a college player producer?
Yeah, I don't put a ton of stock into the run blocking grades, especially. I think, I don't know. I mean, FSU, I think, has been pretty solid in the run game this year, and they have like one guy over 60. So I don't trust those a ton. I do definitely put a lot of stock into the pass pro stuff. Oh, yeah, Jawan Taylor. I like that. I can see that. I put a lot of stock into the pass pro stuff, and games against Florida and Florida State, he had an 88 plus pass pro grade in both of those games. That's probably, I mean, you're not being tested off the edge necessarily as much against Florida State. Daryl Jackson is really the big name in that group, but Daryl Desir, they made Caden Proctor look a little bit silly. Obviously he's figured it back out, but he held his own and then some in those games. 0 pressures allowed on 60 combined pass pro snaps. So I think that's what's going to stand out to scouts is games like that. And like you said, if you can get into the playoff and get another test, that'd be huge for his resume. But just being the stone wall in pass pro that he's been this year and the progression from last year, 18 pressures last year, 3 sacks, 2 hits. This year, 0 sacks, 6 pressures, 1 hit. So he's really cleaned up his pass protection, and I think that's going to be a major selling point.
It's going to be interesting to see where that whole line gets drafted. I think you should see at least Cooper come on the board. Maybe he's an early day 3. But yeah. I think he's someone will draft with a chance to be a starter. Markel Bell, I think, in that range, and Mount Noah. I've heard people talked about him as maybe in the 20s, or I don't see that. I just think because even if you project him as a guard, I think he's still he's got a 1 in front of his draft spot, or he's getting drafted in the top 10.
Yeah, no, I see him as a guard, and I would take him in the top 15 personally. I don't really care that he's a guard, and maybe he might be one of those guys that I'd let fail at tackle just because he's been doing it his entire college career,
Right.
and maybe he's Will Campbell. So who knows? Do you think Sampson will go back to school?
Yeah, he should. He just needs
Yeah,
reps, and I think
yeah,
to get stronger.
yeah,
And also, he's a guard projection, so it's not like, some of these tackles that are freaks of nature that just go like what's his name, Amarius Wims from Georgia.
yeah.
He's not that kind of guy. I think he just needs reps. He needs to get stronger. I think him and Matt McCoy doesn't get talked about as much on this offensive line, but seeing him in person, he's a lot bigger than people think. He's a former tight end. He moves a lot better. I think ultimately he's maybe replaces Markel Bell next year at left tackle and gets that resume. But he's, I think, a guy that we don't talk about him as a draftable guy, but I do think he is someone with an NFL future just because of the physical traits, and he's starting to pile up the reps.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of Brockermeyer. I don't know if he's an NFL player, but he's certainly a good college player. And other than that, I mean, even if you take him out, you might still have 5 draft picks on this offensive line with McCoy and Okunlola together.
Yeah,
So,
I think that's definitely possible. We'll see how the season finishes. Maligned right now, the Miami offensive line struggling to run the ball. I think some of that's schematic, but they got to obviously they got to produce more in that aspect of the game. Wanted to circle back here to the skill positions, right? And somebody that I had not heard a lot about, you put him on my radar. Native of the Bronx, then goes to boarding school, the Taft School in Connecticut. And that is Skylar Bell at UConn. 6 foot, 185, redshirt senior. I don't know if it's 6 foot, but he certainly looks pretty sturdy. A former Wisconsin commit, 3-star player, like I mentioned, boarding school kid from the Bronx, and was decently. I mean, he played at Wisconsin. He had 69 receptions in 2 years, or it's like 3 years. But man, since he's gone to UConn, become the focal point, he has absolutely blown up, and a good reason maybe why you want to stay in a school that's throwing you the ball as opposed to portaling to be just another guy.
yeah, I mean, I thought he had an amazing year last year. I forget who put him on my radar this summer, but I was really impressed with what he did last year. And then you have it here. He totally could have gone to the portal for a bigger school, probably made some more money. But as you said, I think it's going to look pretty dang good when he's got more production than a lot of these guys in this receiver class this upcoming year. Last year, 50 catches, 860 yards, 5 touchdowns in 13 games. Through 8 games this year, he's up to 66 catches, 845 yards, and 8 touchdowns. 10 for 125 and 1 against Boston College, 11 for 105 against Syracuse. So he plays up to the opponent that he's facing. And much like Jace Brown, who we talked about yesterday, kind of the big knock entering the year was he had chronic drop issues, 20 drops in his career, 14.5% drop rate. He's cut that down to 4.3% this year, just 3 drops.
Yeah, it's the production's crazy.
Yeah.
Just the fact that he is getting all these targets, right? I mean, how much do you value targets when you're evaluating a player here? I think a guy like this, again, I mentioned the opportunity he had to go in the portal and maybe lose targets, smart decision to stay at UConn, but just the ability to be targeted so often. I mean, how much of an indicator is it for you? Because it's something I personally look at pretty strong.
I think it's a major indicator. That's something that's probably going to translate, and I think that's kind of a misunderstood concept is, oh, this guy, he's getting force-fed the ball. Well, you don't just get thrown the ball. Like, you have to get open to get thrown the ball. So I think that's really, really a strong indicator for success at the NFL level. You have to get open. That's kind of the name of the game. And if you're, making a living off of contested catches, that kind of scares me away. So a guy like this who can make contested catches, I don't want to get that twisted, 56% this year, but a guy who can get this open, 91 targets in 8 games so far this year, it's a huge deal, I think, for his draft stock.
Yeah, what do you see with the stock and just the player? I mean, this guy's he's not a freshman, right? This is somebody who is a 5th-year senior, so you kind of know what you have here with the player. So, like, what are we dealing with? Like, what do you think his upside is, and just overall your evaluation of Skylar Bell, not just as a good player for UConn, but as a receiver that's in a draft class that could use a little juice.
Yeah, I think he could certainly sneak his way into day 2. But if my team drafts him on day 3, I would be over the moon excited. I think this is a guy who maybe you don't want to be your second option in a receiver room, but I think he would be a perfect like Z in most offenses. I'm looking here; he's pretty split between inside and outside snaps throughout his career. 39% in the slot this year. So yeah, pretty much his entire career, it's been around 60 to 40% slot and wide. So this is a guy who can play inside and outside. He kind of wins at all three levels of the field. Not really like a specialist in any way. He's just a really well-rounded player, and just I don't really know what my comp would be for him, but just like a classic Z receiver that's not he won't get this many targets in the NFL, I don't think, obviously, but a classic Z receiver. Yeah, he's got a 92 or 93 grade on these short passes. He's cut 26 passes for 307 yards. So this is just a guy who can do a little bit of everything. I don't know if he has like total burners to take the top off the defense. I guess that would be one of my complaints, but just a really well-rounded receiver.
Yeah, the thing with him I want to see is the testing, right? Just how big is he? Is he actually 185? That would certainly be a good indicator if he's in that 185, 190 range, over 5'11. Just how quick and explosive is he? How athletic is he really? I think he looks pretty quick and fast on tape, but he had a long one last game.
Yeah.
You look at the production against BC and Syracuse, 125 against BC, 10 catches, 11 catches against Syracuse, 105 yards. So you can put him in the ACC and you would see no drop off, I think, in his ability to get open and make plays. So yeah, just the athleticism part with him, because he is not 6'2", right? He's going to have to show some bursts. Curious what his jumps are, just what his overall explosiveness is. But on tape, I think it looks pretty good.
Yeah, I do think he probably wins more with just like his technique at this point. Just being a guy who's been in college for so long. You think of DK at Wisconsin. I'm sure they overlapped, but that's a guy who came to Florida. He was like no technique. He's like, I'm just going to run past you. So
right.
Maybe that's a sign of the UConn receiver development or something like that. But maybe that's why he stuck around, just to take that next step. I think he's a really refined player right now, and he's a guy who you could probably expect to plug into your rotation as soon as he steps into the NFL.
An interesting player to watch, Skylar Bell. Let's pull some highlights up, because we've been kind of light on the highlights when describing his game.
Oh, yeah.
But I wanted to pull up some all 22 as we watch here.
Yeah, I was listening to this Daft on Draft podcast. I think they described this as Greg Jennings put the team on my back performance in this Syracuse game. He had like half of his team's total receiving yards or something like that, and really just kept them in this game, and they really shouldn't have been.
You can see how quarterback friendly he is.
Yeah. That's what we're talking about. He's just getting open,
And look, I understand Syracuse is not a great team this year, but these are ACC athletes. Syracuse has had some good defensive backs. Did you see that catch, that one-hander?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is the reason why we're talking about him, not just the production he's had throughout the year, but this outstanding performance against Syracuse. His releases are nice. I mean, he really is a well-schooled receiver.
Yeah, no, I think another thing that you just have to be encouraged about is
out of the backfield.
Fact that they're using him, or they're leaning on him in these big games against Power 4 opponents. It's very similar to Harold Fannin last year. Had his two best games against Notre Dame and A&M, I think it was, and Penn State and A&M, I think. But yeah, like that's about as close as you're going to see when you're playing for UConn to the NFL level. So for them to lean on him so heavily, he gets so many targets in those games. I saw he had 7 catches last year when they played Duke. So this is a running theme with him, and they seem to have a lot of trust in Skylar Bell. So I think he checks basically every box that you would want to see from a guy who's like a day 3 group of 5 receiver. Everything you would want to see to hope that translates. He wins in so many different ways. He's quarterback friendly. He gets all these targets. He plays up to his competition. I don't think you really need to worry too much about the jump in level of competition, assuming he checks the combine boxes like we mentioned.
Yeah, no, it's the drop rate you posted, 14.5% down to 4.3%. He still, to me, does seem a little bit. I mean, he has good hands, but it's not like the most natural plucking that they have seen for guys that size. And so the drop rate would be a concern. You want to see if that's an actual change that he just worked through, or if maybe a sample size deal. It's only half the season in the books. So that's something that would I'll say concern me, but that I'd be watching as he goes through workouts in the rest of the year. But a very, very interesting player, and a guy that's going to definitely get some draft buzz. Somebody who absolutely will be getting draft buzz and is extremely just fun to watch with his athleticism is Prince Will. And I'll let you hit the last name. I should have learned this after his brother, but Prince Will for Ole Miss.
Mielen.
Boom. There you go. So man, this Ole Miss program, you look at what they've done in the portal as far as getting defensive linemen. Defensive linemen, they say, are the hardest guys to get in the portal, like NFL quality players. So I think that's pretty accurate. But still, you look at what they've done between Walter Nolan, right, between his brother Princely, Big East. Those are all portal guys that got drafted. And then here, University of Nebraska transfers. We watch his highlights from high school, and that has become a complete disruptor.
Yeah, I mean, he's just so athletic for that size. I was doing a little victory lap the other day. I'm taking anything I can get with this Nebraska debacle over at FSU. I'd like to let the record show, even though I've defended James Williams, who was the one who ended up choosing FSU. Prince Will was my top target from Nebraska. And they sure could use him because right now in Tony White's defense, they don't have a guy to play that jack linebacker spot. That's where Prince Will was playing pretty heavily last year at Nebraska. It was just so obvious that he's going to be a good player. You know, it's a lot like Princely at Florida. There was some criticism from Nebraska fans, he doesn't try in the run game. I remember that being the exact same story with Florida fans and Princely. Yeah. So he certainly tried when he went to Ole Miss, and I think Prince Will has as well. He's just such a versatile athlete that you can really have fun with on defense. You can use him in so many different ways. They haven't dropped him in coverage nearly as much as he did at Nebraska, but one play that will always stick out to me is his freshman year. And Tony White was very complimentary of this rep, but he drops into coverage and just triggers downhill and levels a defender on a wheel route pass in the backfield. So he's just a freak athlete, and he only has one start this year against Kentucky. So he's got another year of eligibility. He's almost certainly going to come back and use that year, but big game this weekend, 7 pressures, 2 sacks, 3 tackles for loss. He made a huge impact. I mean, you could probably call him the MVP of the game for Ole Miss, I think, against Oklahoma.
Yeah, those freshman tackles for Oklahoma having a tough time there with this kind of athlete, but
they're exciting though. They are exciting.
No doubt. And listen, if you're Lane Kiffin, right? Obviously, we know he's going to be the story of the offseason, given that LSU is now open. You have Florida open. Auburn's got money to spend. Ole Miss is a top 10 program right now. They're probably going to make the playoffs, so they're going to have their say in this whole deal. Either way, he's going to get paid. But I think if he's marketing himself, and Penn State, never heard him really tied to Penn State, but you would think he kind of fits what they want given their offensive struggles. But anyways, whatever program you get Lane Kiffin, you know the offensive stuff will be there. He'll help your quarterback. He might take one given that he has 2 right now at Ole Miss. But his ability to find these NFL defensive linemen in the portal, I think, is a difference-making skill set, given that he's going to, like, if you're a new coach, the first thing you probably want to rebuild is that defensive line as fast as you can. It's going to get you on the winning track faster than any other position. So he can maybe do that at a school like a Florida, where he already has good players there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you worry about the sustainability, but it's a lost start right now. You know, he's doing what Mike Norvell did at the start of the portal era, except we're in the NIL era, we're fully in the portal era, and that's kind of dried up for every other team unless you're Texas Tech or something and want to spend the big bucks. But you don't really see schools that can just completely transform a position group with the portal these days. And that's exactly what Lane's done 2 years in a row. And you lose those 3 guys that we mentioned in the portal to the draft. And I mean, I don't see a massive drop off, honestly. I mean, that was a really good defensive line. It's hard to replicate that, but the defensive line has not been an issue as far as I can tell. Maybe Ole Miss fans would totally disagree with me, but I think they hit once again. And you're right. That's a totally huge deal for if he leaves, bringing in a guy who in the portal that can play, so it's big, I think, really. And he's got other guys, Xavier Harris, the big, 6'8", 330-pound defensive tackle. He was a high school recruit, but he's got a little bit of a mix now.
What's the number? Number 52, Eccles.
Will Eccles.
He was impressive. I looked him up because I didn't remember him before seeing him here this year, and he's a high school recruit as well.
Yeah, 8 pressures in his last 2 games against Georgia and Oklahoma. So
so that
I would be I mean, we've talked about it. I think Lane's probably the top guy on the market, and I would be super excited if my school hired him.
And look, Ole Miss might just say, listen, you can get defensive linemen here.
Yeah,
Both portal and, now that we mentioned homegrown, as I look at this, we talked about Eccles. You mentioned Harris. He also has Cam Franklin, who was a big recruiting battle that he won to keep him home in Mississippi. We know Mississippi has a lot of talented defensive linemen, probably per capita. I mean, shoot, I think of Simmons at in Tennessee. I think of Chris Jones in Kansas City. I believe they're both Mississippi 5-stars. Correct me if I'm wrong. So
yeah.
Mississippi, it produces defensive linemen from high school. So the fact that you're not, it's not an era where, back in the day you'd say, okay, Ole Miss versus Alabama, you can have a cute offense, whatever, but Alabama's always going to be able to recruit all the best defensive linemen. At the end of the day, they're going to steamroll you with those guys. That was the old model, right? When maybe Hugh Freeze was at Ole Miss. But you look at it now. I mean, is there any reason why Ole Miss can't have a defensive line that's as good as anybody in the SEC, which typically translates into a national championship contender?
Yeah, I mean, with the way that Lane's been recruiting, I don't know if they'd sustain it if he left, but I think if he does leave, he's changed that program and put them up a tier.
Well, before you get, what I'm saying is, he doesn't have to leave, assuming that he can get a raise out of Ole Miss to match what other teams are trying to pay him. Like, the old idea would be he has to leave to recruit the defensive line first rounders that you need to win a championship coming out of the SEC. The guys that always go to Alabama, maybe sometimes will go to LSU, and certainly Georgia had their run with those guys. But what I'm saying is, if you look at what he had last year with Walter Nolan and some of these guys, look at this year's defensive linemen. You look at some of the young homegrown guys. You look at what the state has typically produced that has gone to Alabama, Georgia, or Mississippi State in the case of Simmons and Jones. Like, you could have a championship caliber defensive line at Ole Miss based on what I'm seeing, and guys like Prince will, and then you still do what you do on offense with full autonomy, and we've seen them do it successfully with now Division II quarterbacks. So why not just do it at Ole Miss if you can have the money, getting guys like Prince will?
I think that's probably going to be part of Ole Miss's pitch to Lane to keep him around is, that this is you've shown that you can do this to some extent. Now let's take it to the next level. Let's increase the funding. Let's really take over the state, because you're totally right. There's some really, really impressive athletes in the state of Mississippi. And I mean, they showed it by getting a guy named Franklin top 80 recruit last year, or 2 years ago it was.
Yeah, no, it's a fun team to watch. I think that's that. We talk about Trinidad so much, and with good reason, but this defensive line, I'm glad you highlighted them, because they got some dudes that are going to be playing on Sundays and they're making a lot of plays on Saturday. They're going to really help Ole Miss get over the hump that they probably should have gotten over last year with the roster they had and some of the defensive linemen they had there on that team. But let's close off here with a player that's interesting to me because he was not on my radar at all. And I looked into kind of his production this year. He's really just starting now to get into the production mode, but you highlighted him quickly. You want to talk about him, and I'll let you handle the pronunciation. Is it Zadrius?
I think so.
Zadrius Rainey-Sale. Zadrius Rainey-Sale out of Spanaway, Washington.
Yeah, so linebacker out of Washington. I was a really big fan of this guy. He was one of the few linebackers that FSU whiffed on in his recruiting class. I think ultimately he didn't really want to leave home. His parents didn't really want him to leave home, so he stays in Washington. Top 100 player in the composite, top 5 linebacker, number 1 player in his state. He had a ACL tear after his season last year, his high school senior season. So he's missed a lot of time so far this year, but I think he's played in a few games now, and he's been really impressive when he's played. Wasn't able to find any clips from this season, but he's been targeted 7 times this year. He's allowed 4 catches, but on those other 3 targets, they've all been pass breakups. So he's got 3 pass breakups on the year. 6'3", 225-pound linebacker. He just looks the part, man.
He could rush the passer too, right?
Yeah, no. So my high school comp for him was Jihad Campbell, just a guy who he can rush the passer. He can trigger downhill in the run game. He can turn and run with receivers. So he's just what it looks like. I think he probably is one of the higher end talents on that Washington roster right now, if I had to bet.
Yeah, and it's that Washington team coming off a huge performance against Illinois. Here's Jed Fish on Zadrius. Says, I thought he did a good job playing linebacker in 3 deep zone. He did it right. He's very athletic. He's got great size. He continued to show us he's improving. He's had 27 plays in this game for someone who didn't have a training camp, didn't have a spring ball. Pretty fun to watch him get better and better every week as he rebounds from that ACL tear. But man, super talented guy. And just watching those highlights, you see the speed and the burst. Washington's kind of like Ole Miss. Fish is going to be on a lot of lists, but then you say, all right, well, look, Washington's getting a lot of pros. I mean, their draft history, if you look at their first round history going back a few years, really a few coaches, they've been, to me, one of the better producers of not just NFL talent in bulk, but high-end guys that can get drafted first round or higher. And I think this is a guy that has those tools.
Yeah, they have that 5-star offensive tackle commit, right?
Yep.
So yeah, there's certainly guys out on the West Coast, and
Cody Green.
Cody Green. These West Coast teams, UCLA, USC, maybe not Oregon recently, but they're always kind of bouncing around. Are they back? Are they not back? How serious are they about football? At any time, if one of these schools just wants to really commit and really go after a lot of these high-end recruits out on the West Coast, they can do it, So don't let these guys get away. And I think you're totally right. I think it's very similar to Ole Miss. And I mean, Washington's had success. I'm sure their fans know what it looks like and they want to support that again. So I think you're totally right. It's very possible that we don't see Jed Fish leave just because of that.
Yeah, I'm just looking at their draft history, and I'm just raw counting. Since 2015, so let's say 10 years ago, I'm counting 11 first rounders. I mean, look at this. Obviously, this national championship team right here, where you have receiver, quarterback, and an offensive lineman. Plus, Rosengarten's playing very well. A couple other receivers here getting drafted on day 2. McDuffie, as good as any cornerback in the pros. Kyler Gordon, another good talent there. Physically, that they produced very good defensive backs. Cade Otton's had success. Joe Tryon. These are high picks, not just first rounders, but day 2 guys as well. Offensive line, they had it with McGarry. Vita Vea, we know what he is. Going all the way down here, this class. Shaq Thompson, maybe Shaq Thompson a little bigger, or sorry, a little smaller than what we're talking about here with Zadrius, but talk about a guy who can run and make athletic plays. That was one. So with Zadrius, what you've seen, I mean, I know it's early to project, but why are you so intrigued by this player that you highlighted him in a week where he's still getting his snaps up?
Yeah, I just think we're seeing just the start of it, and I think last year's recruiting linebacker class was about as talented as you'll ever see. Just there's a lot of guys with so much potential. Ty Jackson at Florida, Tavion Wallace at Arkansas, although maybe entering the portal now with the coaching change. But there's just so many guys who are extremely physically gifted, and this is a guy. I see there's so many paths to him becoming a good player. He's so good in so many different ways. And he's got long arms, he's got speed, he's just got every tool that you would want. And to see him bounce back from that injury, playing so well so early, getting that praise from his head coach, I think we might want to get ahead of this one before he really goes national.
That's what we're trying to be. We want to be the first video on some of these players that we go back and look on. And this guy really, I got to say, Fink, he is very. I had to watch him in the Washington game and really key in on him because the high school stuff is absurd. Yeah. And the fact that he's playing, that was a real game, right, that he was playing in. It's not like they're playing him against the FCS opponent trying to get him going. So clearly they want to get him on the field. And, man, he has some stopping power as a tackler. The speed is there. Here, see him. I can't stress this enough. And I don't think if you've seen this one, one exercise I like to do, I always talk about on this show, is I go back and I'll watch high school highlights from guys that get drafted first round just to see what the kind of common things that jump out are and calibrate the eyes a little bit when you watch so many of these idle videos. With the defensive players that get drafted first round, and I'm talking about whether it's a defensive tackle or a corner and everything in between, touchdowns on offense.
Yeah.
I very rarely will see a first-round defensive player that is not scoring touchdowns on offense, really, and defense in his high school clips. I mean, even Vita Vea, speaking of Washington, was a like option quarterback. If you watch his clips, like wildcatting it in there. It seems like they all do it, and you see it here with him playing some tight end.
Yeah, so 13 catches for 230 yards and 4 touchdowns as a junior. So this is definitely a guy who played both ways. He's just such a good athlete, man. I keep saying that, but I really don't see what he can't do on the football field if he continues to progress. And I know he's a linebacker, but I think he has the tools to be a late round one guy if he really reaches his ceiling. And we have a long way to
Long
go.
way to go. Yeah.
You know, he's in his third game. He might not even be a third year declaree. He might transfer, but the tools are very evident with Zadrius Rainey. So
Well, you heard it here first with Fink. When this is your next first round linebacker out of Washington. Wow, man, look at that play. Holy moly. Big time athlete. I'm co-signing. I got to watch this guy. I'm going to make sure I record watching his game next week because I got to see this guy in action. Zadrius. Get the name right here. Zadrius Rainey Sale out of Spanaway, Washington. Fink, I think you got one.
I think so. He looks like it.
All right, guys. Remember to like and subscribe to Group Chat Sports. We are talking all kinds of college football, whether it's, freshman that's playing 20 snaps or some of the stars of the game, transfer portal movement, recruiting, coaching movement. We'll have it all for you on Group Chat Sports Live. Remember to like and subscribe to Group Chat Sports. If you're joining us from Canes Inside, we do this a few times a week, man. Just give you the college football stuff on top of your Canes stuff so you can see who's next in the world of college football. Get your tampering in early. But again, appreciate everybody joining us. Like and subscribe. We'll see you later.
See ya.